And I am working as a therapist more than 10 years, and I have heard, I wish I had left sooner, so many times. And the thing is, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being alone, the fear of regretting the choice, the fear of so many imaginary situations keeps people stuck. The fear of judgment, the fear of what other people are going to think, the fear of the person moving on. Obviously, there's a lot of things that can happen that need to be taken into consideration, like family situations changing, living situations changing, but the amount of people that have left unfulfilling, unhappy, toxic relationships and endured living with an absolute weapon for years and years and years, that is the biggest thing that I hear the most often. I wish I had left sooner. I wish I had trusted myself. I knew 6 months in, I knew a year in, I knew that time that person did X, and it's so clear in their mind. I nearly left. That one time I was so close to leaving, and then I stayed. And very often what's underneath this sometimes is expectation, obligation, fear. Sometimes it's that investment fallacy. You know, I've put so many years on this, I don't want to walk away from it, I don't want it to be a failure, I have to stay for X amount of reasons. And it keeps them trapped. And very often they're going against their intuition, they're going against their own inner knowing. This is not what they want. They don't want to be in this relationship, and yet they stay and they suffer, and they're nearly like a martyr going through it. And who are you proving this to? You know, you don't get some sort of award for how much you can endure. Being with a toxic person or being with somebody that's making you miserable and unhappy, that is not the whole purpose and premise of being in a relationship. It's not about how much you can suffer to prove to yourself you're a good person. The freedom that people experience out the other side of letting go of a relationship that was draining them body, mind and soul and heart, the freedom out the other side of that is immeasurable. It's night and day, being in your own space, being your own person again, having your own quality of life, making your own choices, spending time with the people you want to be with, reclaiming yourself. That is such a massive part of it. Finding your sparkle again, finding the thing that made you you. You know, the person that all your friends knew you to be, that you lost, that you started to hide and mask and tone down, that you lost sight of. Like, all that's starting to come back once you have the courage to let it go. And look, I say courage because it's not a decision that people take lightly. It's such a big thing to be able to walk away from a relationship that you have invested years on, that you've poured energy and effort, and you've stood by all sorts of trauma and betrayal and loads of different things. But that is, without a doubt, one of the things that I've heard the most. I wish I had left sooner. I knew it was done. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't act on it. I didn't trust myself. My self-esteem wasn't in a good place. My self-worth wasn't in a good place. I didn't want to let anybody down. I didn't want it to be a failure. I didn't want to rock the boat. I was too worried about what people were going to say. You know, I was supposed to have the house and the kids and the marriage and all these different things by this age, and I did all those things, but it was still wrong. It was still not right for me. And I just pushed those feelings down. I just pushed them down and ignored them. And I self-betrayed, and then eventually it got unbearable. They couldn't do it anymore. And sometimes when that happens, then other indirect behaviours might emerge. People start acting out. They start living parallel lives away from each other. The conflict gets out of hand. Affairs start happening. Other types of betrayals start happening. And sometimes they stand by each other even after all this has happened. Even when there's been massive lies and betrayals and breaches of trust. And yet, what I will say, having worked with loads of people that have been through this process, is that thing that they say about, I wish I had left sooner, so I could have maybe saved myself all that time. I could have maybe saved myself all that pain. I could have come back to myself sooner. I could have unpacked this in therapy. I could have changed that cycle. I mightn't have made those destructive choices had I known what I know now. And being able to forgive themselves, being able to meet themselves with self-compassion, to be able to make the rest of their life the best of their life, intentionally, because they've unlearned everything that kept them in that container in the first place. And I've seen this as well so many times. People come out of those difficult relationships and they're so overwhelmed and they don't want to be in their own, and then they meet somebody else and then they go into another mad relationship that keeps them stuck, that's inevitably going to lead them back to the same conclusions or bring them back into therapy at a later date in time. And this is the piece. If you can take the time and courage to let go of what you know is not working for you, take some time and space to be in the discomfort of being on your own, and working through your stuff and figuring yourself out and what it is that you want from your life, you can be a more discerning chooser. You can be more resourced in how you're approaching relationships, and you can totally transform the cycle of the types of partners you're drawing in, that you're calling on, that you're attracted to, that you're connecting with. And you don't have to operate from that place of regret, because you will see it as a relational experience that brought you to this point, and it will only be something that you will regret if you don't ever choose to intentionally change this cycle and you go from place to place to place, person to person to person, and carry that destruction forward. Because you're going to wake up one day and be like, why is this still happening? And you're going to get so frustrated. And you can avoid that by simply taking the time to stop and just focusing on yourself, getting clear in yourself, working through your stuff, building yourself up, building your self-esteem up, your identity, your relationship to yourself, all the conditioning, all the stuff under the hood that was perpetuating these issues. And sometimes the things that are keeping you stuck and tied to them relationships you don't want to be in aren't even yours. They're other people's expectations, other people's standards, other people's social expectations, cultural, familial, religious expectations. They mightn't even be yours. They mightn't even fit this version of you anymore. But you won't know that until you get slow and you get quiet and you come into yourself and you unpack this and you process it and you learn from it. Because you can always make the argument you didn't know what you didn't know. But on some level, your intuition was screaming. On some level, you were choosing to push that down. And when you can come to that kind of conclusion, come to that kind of awareness and learn from it, you can stop that cycle going forward. And that is massive. That is a huge, huge shift and pivot in itself.